Good evening, everyone. Thank you all so much for coming. My name is Jade, and for my project, I did an online psychology university course, and I created a blog about my experience. Ever since I joined Constantia Waldorf High School in grade 9, I've always been thinking about what I would do for my Class 12 project, but I've never had a concrete idea. Ever since I joined, When the project process had started for me, it was rather a daunting thought that I would have to complete such a huge project and then speak about it in front of so many people. This feeling was only heightened by the fact that I had no idea what I was going to do. The closer the project proposal deadlines got, the more frustrated and worried I got. I went through countless ideas and I spent a lot of time researching my ideas because I wanted to do something that A, I really enjoyed, and B, something that I could use in my later life. Eventually, my mother, who had been helping me look into universities and colleges, broached the idea of doing a micro course for the South African College of Applied Psychology. I immediately jumped at the idea because I've always been very interested in psychology and it's what I want to study at university. And it was an added bonus that SACAP was a college that I've been looking into very heavily, and so with my project finally sorted, I felt like I could finally breathe again. I've always been interested in psychology and why people do what they do. This interest formed when I was about 12 and I was watching crime series with my grandparents. The interest started as just an interest in murder mysteries and true crime documentaries, but then when I was about 14, I began to question why all the people in my shows and documentaries were doing these things. This is where my interest in psychology was born. I've always been interested in why people do the things they do, and I've always known I want to do something in the psychology field. So this is why I was so excited about the idea of doing a course on counselling. I saw it as a way for me to try out the field and get the experience and feel like what the work was going to be. When I began looking into the different types of courses, I was very unsure of which course I should choose, which one would be the most interesting and which one would be the most informative. After about a week, I decided on the fundamentals of counselling. I chose this course because out of all of them, this was the one that I felt like was going to give me a good overview of the kind of things I would be learning if I decided to study in this field. As well as, I felt like this course would give me a taste of what university would be like and to really make sure that this was actually something I wanted to do. This was where I decided that as well as doing the course, I was going to start a blog on my experience of doing the university course. Once I had signed up for the course, things began to get a bit complicated. While waiting for the course to start, I started working on my blog. I found it a bit challenging at first to figure out how everything worked, and I struggled to get everything to work how I wanted to, but I eventually got it up and running. Then I faced another issue. After I'd finally got the blog all set up, I felt like my project was at a complete standstill, and it completely stopped progressing. I tried to keep tweaking the blog page, but there was only so much I could do. So all I could do was wait for the course to start. I found this so challenging to keep myself motivated and feeling positive about my project, as well as trying to keep myself excited about the project. After a long wait, it was finally time to start the course. This is when I got very busy. The course was 6 weeks long and it consisted roughly of about 9 to 12 45-minute modules a week with an assessment and a quiz every week. So I was juggling normal schoolwork, my course, updating my journal and my blog. This was another struggle for me because now instead of having nothing to do, I had so much to do and I was tempted a few times to give up and just stop for a while and come back to it later. But I didn't allow myself to do that and I kept pushing. I extremely enjoyed doing the course and it gave me a very good overview of counselling and an in-depth look into the sort of stuff I would be learning in university. The course dived into how to create a counsellor-client relationship, how to gain the trust of your client, how to set professional boundaries and how to enforce them. The course also explained how to talk to a client and how to know when to let them just walk and talk and unload, and how to suggest and help clients come up with their own solutions. This course did this through short little skits, demonstrating the skills as well as giving me access to certain university textbooks to read about the current skill I was learning. At the beginning of this process, I saw it as a huge challenge, and I felt quite overwhelmed by the huge task, but throughout the process, I've constantly enjoyed learning about something I'm so interested in. I'm so grateful that I was given this opportunity to experience what I want to study before I commit to it. And finally, I want to say a huge thank you to my external mentor, Peter Mees, who unfortunately couldn't be here tonight, and another huge thank you to my internal mentor, Mr. Stodel. He's helped me so much, especially with the more creative side of my project, and as well as sort of calming me down when I got a bit too in my head about it. And finally, I wanted to say thank you to all my friends who have really supported me throughout this process. Thank you so much.
Hello everybody, my name is Hannah, and before we begin, I would like you to all close your eyes for the duration of the song.
Every plant given life by his hands, every stone placed to build pathways in the sand, there was a magical feeling surrounding that land, a mystical feeling surrounding that land. And I'd curl up on my mother with the fire blaze. My memories of then are a haze, but I can still smell the rainbows after night's rain, and the fairies and the magic that blossom from our brain.
I'm now going to read you an excerpt from one of my short stories, Feinborg's Fairies. We walked along the path, our bare feet touching the honey-colored sand that was scattered with small rocks. With each step we took, we could feel the light sting of the ground pressing against our skin, a consequence of spending days walking in the mountains. Nature surrounded us. The green shrubs brushed against our skin, leaving behind soft kisses from the Feinborgs. The proteas that were scattered all around us stared into the sky that we so wishfully followed. Our cheeks were red, and slowly as the day passed on, our faces filled with sun-kissed freckles, as though the natural world was leaving behind its mark on our skin. That is from my collection of short stories, Eating the Sun, which I wrote for my grade 12 project. It took me a while to land on this as my final project because I had so many ideas: online magazine, photography, animation, and just so much more. I was getting carried away by the idea of having focused time to get creative. Although after much thought and searching, I chose this as a way to challenge myself. I'm a continuous journaler, and so I wanted to finally create a complete collection. Playing the song Feinborgs by Alice Phoebe Lou just now was a way to give you all some insight as to how I found inspiration when writing. My reaction to this song inspired me to write this story, and by playing it and by experiencing this excerpt, you can catch a glimpse of how I felt listening to it. Each of my stories has its own inspiration, whether it's a song, experience, or a person. And the beauty with writing and with music is the freedom for one's own interpretation. And for me, writing is the act of extracting beauty out of life in order to create something beautiful through words. I find inspiration all around me, from the small things in life, a sunset, a walk in nature, a river swim, a song playing in my headphones, to the big things too. Grief, memories from the past, loneliness, and even despair. Now, one thing you should know about me is that I've been journaling since I was 10. I use it as a mechanism to sort through my thoughts, write down my experiences, and document my ideas. And so the switch from journaling to writing about characters was one of the most difficult things. In the beginning, I struggled to write without telling, although I persevered, getting help from Akira, one of my mentors, and towards the end, I had a lot more comfort in the writing process. Writing these stories has been something completely different for me. A few of the stories have really made me dig deep down in order to see how to word the emotions that live inside me. The Boy in the Acacia was one of the first stories I wrote. Although it is set in a fiction-based world, the meaning for me is very personal. The story follows a young boy who is lost in the Pilansberg. It goes through his relationship with his surroundings and the idea of being lost. The story is based around my grandfather. When I was 9 years old, I lost my grandfather to cancer. And this story really helped me explore the depths of his love with nature and also finally helped me grapple with the fact that I will never truly be able to know him. Sometimes stories would take me weeks to write. Not because the words wouldn't come to me, but rather because whenever I would start to write, it would just feel too real. Majority of my stories are set with a South African backdrop. The characters take many forms since, as I was writing, I really tried to push myself outside of my comfort zone. When it came down to sitting and writing the stories, it was not something that was very difficult. When I had the inspiration, I could write anywhere and anytime. The early hours of the morning, sitting in an empty classroom at school, or even in the car with my friends. But editing was probably one of the hardest parts of this project. Whenever I initially completed the stories, I felt this raw connection to not only the characters, but also the plot line. And so when it came time to properly edit, I was quite hesitant. Only after spending some time away and getting feedback from my mentors did I manage to view editing for what it is. A refining and developing stage of a story, rather than the changing or dismantling of your work. Now, at the beginning of the process, I knew that I wanted each of my stories to be accompanied by some artistic element, and at first I played around with photography. I spent my free time planning elaborate photo shoots, and after doing 2 shoots, one taken by Sean Finsale, and the other taken by me of my dear friend Kiara. Now, although I love the results of the photo shoots, I found the idea of pairing my stories with photographs felt quite limiting to the stories themselves. I wanted the reader to be able to freely interpret the narratives without being caged by an image already clearly painted before them. When I started to do illustrations, I based them off the images that I had taken. And soon, creating these line drawings became something of a relief from pouring myself into the words that defined my existence at that point. When it came to designing the cover, I was overwhelmed with ideas, and many of them never felt as though they were right, and I eventually settled on this for my cover. In each of the frames, there are illustrations which draw from my research, the accompanying animations, and the illustrations inside the book. And making the draft for this cover was quite a warm, comforting conclusion. I made a collage sketch which I then illustrated over. I really wanted to use images that tied the whole project together, creating a unified image of the external parts of my project that are not included inside the book. Now, throughout the whole entire process, whenever I was struck by inspiration or felt the need to procrastinate from doing any actual work, I would spend my time animating. The animations was something very interesting for me to play around with, because I felt as though I was learning something new, whilst at the same time expanding my project through moving art. I started animating in September last year when Katja, Roxy, and I decided to do an animation for an English project. It had always been something that I'd wanted to try out, and so when I got this opportunity, I knew that I wanted to have some kind of artistic movement involved. The first animation I made was based on the story, The World We Loved. When I began this animation, I started by playing around with simple colors and drawings, and then slowly it ended up molding into something about the story. The other two also began the same, and then as I continued to work on them, they became something related to my project. When it came to advertising, I knew that I wanted to do something that really made me stand out. I had the animations, and then when it came to giving out actual details about my book, I decided to create a website. Although the website was never the main focus, and so I would spend 2 or 3 evenings a month working out how I wanted it to be laid out and finalizing all the hand-drawn elements which I wanted to add. My website, although advertising my book, was also created as a sort of portfolio because I want to be able to take it with me into the future. Printing the book, I knew that I wanted it to be A6 sized. From the beginning, I've had the idea of my book being pocket size. I want my book to be something that you can take with you everywhere, a transportable world that you can dive into whenever you feel the need to. Now, formatting was not too difficult, but this was only because I started with formatting before I'd even finished all of my short stories. So when it came time to sending it to the printers, it was just the tedious work of figuring out if I liked where the illustrations were and making sure that all the bleed margins were correct. This project has really helped me develop my skills, not only as a writer, but also as a creator. Each of the stories draws from something that I hold very dear to my heart, and I hope that as you read the stories, you'll be able to fully immerse yourselves into the world that I've created. Now, before I end, I would also just like to take this opportunity to bring awareness to the social issues that are happening around our world and their link to literature. Writing has the ability to take our minds into a plane of extraordinary imagination, and in that, it holds power. It holds the power to oppress, to bring freedom and hope. In books like 1984 by George Orwell, which has been banned in several countries around the world, we see this extreme takeover of a totalitarian regime. And by reading this potential portrayal of our future, we then understand what we must fight against. When I look back at everything that this project has taught me, I now understand that going into the future, I would like to keep writing. During this process, I published an article on Substack, and soon after, the Cape Creative Collective reached out to me and invited me to write for them. I want to write about topics that are important and bring awareness and enact change, and hopefully this is just the beginning. Now, finally, for the thank yous. Firstly, I would like to thank my mom, who has spent many hours listening to me ramble on about my many ideas and creative concepts. My dad, my brother, my sisters, Ty, Bodhi, and the rest of my family, who have constantly been there for me. Thanks to my dear friend Chiara for her continued support and ideas. To Roxy, Jensen, and Katja, you three have stood by me, helped me through many unrelated breakdowns, and always been the light in the dark. Now lastly, I would like to thank all my mentors. Anya, my internal mentor, who has helped me stay on track. Jessica Fonsale, Sandra Hill, Monty Rude, and Akira Rabinovitz for giving me advice and helping me edit my stories. My book would not be what it is today without you. And finally, a thank you to everyone here tonight who has come to support. You can buy a copy of my book at my stand, online, or at Clark's bookshop.
Good evening. I have been at Waldorf for nearly 15 years, and each year I have witnessed the current grade 12s
stand up on the stage and bravely share their experiences and what they have achieved. I have spent many of my primary years losing sleep over the thought of this process and anxiously waiting for my time. I honestly can't believe I'm finally here. I have dedicated 9 months to this, and I have created something that I feel proud enough to share. Despite spending years worrying and preparing myself for this, I still battled trying to decide on a topic for my project and debated it tirelessly with my family. I had so many ideas, but none I really felt willing to commit to. Then, for my birthday, I got gifted a vintage Elna sewing machine from an amazing family friend, and suddenly, all the pieces fell into place. Thank you. Ever since I was young, I have loved fashion and clothes and dress up. Both my mother and my grandmother were dancers, so throughout my childhood I had a treasure chest of old dance costumes to choose from. I would spend hours playing with these lycra dresses and leotards, reimagining them with anything I could get my hands on, ribbons, buttons, the works. My style became a way for me to express who I was without having to say anything, and despite sometimes being teased about it, I still wore whatever I felt good in. With the opportunity to spend 9 months exploring a project I was passionate about, and with my new sewing machine, it was clear that I was meant to do something involving sewing, and was immediately drawn to the idea of creating a concept, a collection around a specific concept. After debating a few ideas and discussing it with my family and everyone else that would listen, I finally settled on my first theme, which focused on exploring the emotions and experiences of what it's like to be a young woman in today's society. Now, along with the machine, I also got a few sewing lessons. So after a few of those classes with my sewing teacher, and once my project proposal was approved, I asked her to be my external mentor, and we began with the process of pattern making. We began the skirt with one of my initial designs, but after only a couple of lessons, we ran into some conflict when she told me she didn't agree with some of the emotions and experiences I was designing outfits around. She suggested I focus on themes like pregnancy and the fear of becoming unattractive to your husband. Themes I could very not clearly relate to at all. I felt as though she wasn't hearing me and letting me create what was significant to my experiences. Eventually, I had to step back and start again, but I had already lost months of valuable time. So, after I gave myself some time to reassess my situation, I met with a new potential external mentor. But unfortunately, she told me she didn't have the time to help me create the patterns I needed from scratch. She explained that it's a skill typically learned in fashion school with official proper training, and because she didn't have the time to teach me herself, she suggested I find an alternative solution. As a result, I shifted my approach. I decided to source downloadable patterns online that closely matched my original designs and then adapted and tailored them until they aligned with my vision. Because of these challenges, I also made the decision to shift my theme to something more manageable and relevant to the resources and support I had available, thus settling on my final. Honoring the women who have shaped my life and have helped to make me the person I am today. Throughout my life, I have been lucky enough to have been grown up surrounded by incredible women, strong, kind, creative women who have taught me how to navigate life in all its complexity. For the scope of this project, I chose only 4 who are especially close to me. Each design is inspired by something they've passed down to me, whether it's a lesson, a value, or a part of who they are that I've always looked up to. To deepen the narrative, I've connected each piece to one of the 7 feminine archetypes, chosen to mirror the qualities of the woman who inspired the look. For my first look, we have the mystic. The mystic archetype embodies a spiritually attuned individual, guided by inner harmony, mindfulness, and deep self-awareness. Radiating calm and compassion, the mystic offers wisdom and emotional support, serving as a grounding, healing presence during times of uncertainty. The idea behind this look was that the cape would represent the embrace of angel wings, soft, protective, and powerful. I wanted it to feel like a moment of being held and supported. I chose the deep maroon to symbolize the imperial and statuesque nature of angels. Next, we have the sage. The sage archetype, or wise woman, is known to be a brilliant thinker, driven by the desire to know. The wise woman's purpose is closely connected to helping others with her insight. The sage is admired for her wisdom, knowledge, and a deep understanding of the world, and can offer great guidance as she possesses a wealth of experience. The focus of this piece is the hard body corset, which is made to bear likeness to the continuous flow of knowledge. The contrast between the body and hard protection of the top reflects the sage's soft wisdom wrapped in strong discipline. The corset becomes more than a garment. It is a visual metaphor for intellect contained, guided, and passed down to the next generation. I constructed this top by soaking my fabric in resin, which I then put on a plastic mannequin, and I could mold into any silhouette that I wanted. Then once it dried, it kept that same shape. I had a lot of fun with this, and I made quite a few before I settled on my final. Next, we have the huntress. This look was influenced by the leaves of the oak tree, where in many ancient mythologies are known to symbolize strength and endurance. The darts in the dress are reference to the gently curved indentations of the leaves, and the thin chiffon, which fills the darts, when it moves, it sounds like leaves rustling in the wind. The huntress archetype is known to embody fierce independence, strength, and resilience. Known for her courage and self-confidence, she possesses a strong will and an unshakable determination to overcome obstacles. Self-reliant and empowered, the huntress does not seek support or validation from others. She radiates a warrior-like energy, always ready to face challenges and protect herself and those she holds dear. Lastly, we have the caregiver. The caregiver archetype, or more commonly referred to as the mother in the past, embodies compassion, loyalty, and selfless devotion. Often seen as a nurturing presence, the caregiver provides emotional support and stability to those around her. Attentive, dependable, and deeply attuned to others' needs, she creates a safe and comforting environment, offering love and reassurance with unwavering dedication. For this look, I paired the caregiver archetype with animal ears to represent the instinctual, almost primal act of care. To echo this idea, I lined the sleeves with a gentle pink fabric, subtly mimicking the look and feel of animal ears. Just as animals are attuned to the needs of their young, the ears symbolize the caregiver's heightened sensitivity. It also adds a layer of softness and empathy. The ears become a symbol of the caregiver's ability to listen, sense, and respond with love and protection. As much as I enjoyed this process, there were many times that I wanted to give up. Mainly every time I had to unpick something, which happened way more than I would like to admit.
and sometimes it felt like I unpicked more stitches than I sewed. I spent countless hours hunched on my bedroom floor, cutting out patterns and pinning and unpinning my fabric, and my body and my back took a bit of a hit, but I think it was worth it. Although I had basic knowledge about how to operate a machine from a handwork project a few years back, I was still very much a novice. Because I was teaching myself as I went, a copious amount of troubleshooting was involved. And I remade 2 of the dresses from scratch because they could not fit over my shoulders. I had to reconfigure my design so many times and constantly had to readapt the patterns and even the finished dresses. This project tested me. It tested my patience, resilience, commitment, and need for perfectionism, as I really struggled with the idea that nothing was ever good enough, and that my designs were neither unique, beautiful, or significant. I am very interested in avant-garde and conceptual fashion, and I really wanted my collection to be works of wearable art. But I had to learn that I do not yet have the skills to create on the level that I want to. I had to learn to readjust my expectations, and one of the more challenging parts of my project was learning to let go. I had to learn that the process was more important than the outcome, because at the end of the day, I taught myself how to sew, and I created something I am proud of. I have learned a new skill, found a new hobby, and it gave me space to creatively engage with something that could shape my future. Now, for my thank yous. I would like to thank my internal mentor, Ms. Pomeza, for being there to support and motivate me, and Andy, my external mentor, for just waiting on the sidelines if I ever needed her. I would like to thank my family for always encouraging my creativity and expression. Your support, excitement, and love really got me through all the tiring and frustrating moments. And to the men who have helped shape who I am, thank you. Though this project focuses on feminism, your presence and support remain just as meaningful to me. And lastly, I would like to express my gratitude to all the women who have empowered me. This collection is both a celebration of the women who have guided and inspired me, and a restoration of self-identity. It gave my inner child the chance to take up space, to create without boundaries, explore her creativity without fear, and to take pride in her voice and artistic expression, just like she always wanted to. Thank you so much, everyone.
My name is Tyla, and I'll be talking about the art of glass. So, I've had a hyperfixation on stained glass for some time now, particularly stained glass windows, as niche as that sounds. And mainly because that's the form of stained glass you come across the most on the rare occasion I leave my bedroom. And I've always resented, not to be controversial, but I've always resented the use of minimalism and the modernist use of blacks, whites, and greys in modern architecture. It's why I prefer styles like Art Nouveau. And it's why I prefer styles like Art Nouveau. It has a lot of use of color and ornamentation and detail that I think stained glass has a big reflection of that. But what made me really decide to practice stained glass as my project is when I was at a familial gathering, and I was talking to my aunt, who said she'd been working with a man who specialized in stained glass, and apparently he's retiring, and that was quite important to a lot of people because stained glass has been considered a dying art for some time now. It's been around for years, since the medieval ages, and that made me wonder how possible it was for any random person, me, to do it myself as a hobby. So when the projects came around, I had a good idea of what I wanted to do. Now, my biggest concern
with doing stained glass was how practical it was, whether it was affordable even, or just whether I was capable. And because I needed to figure out that answer, I clearly had to talk to someone. So a little Google search of stained glass companies near me, I found a place called The Art of Glass, which explains my name. And I spoke on the phone with a woman named Priscilla. I found out that it was a woman-run company, just by two sisters, and the place wasn't massive, but I think I preferred that. It was just run by those two women, and I think that made it a lot less intimidating for a random teenager to walk in and ask them for help, as if they knew what that meant. And when I was at the workshop, I called them. They said I could come by any time, as confused as they sounded when I spoke to them. And I went there. Their workshop was cluttered with half-finished projects and small things that they had just made for fun, like this flower. And they had that just alongside massive projects. At the time I went there, they were working on two massive stained glass windows for a castle that was being rebuilt somewhere around here. And they just had these things lying around as well. They weren't selling them, they just had them around. And they really emphasized the importance of still making those big, beautiful glass windows and the things you'd sell, but also to have fun with it. And Priscilla, knowing that I had never tried anything before, told me to try and make just a butterfly. She showed me a simple stained glass butterfly, a pattern, and she went through the steps of how to create it. So you would start with taking a glass cutter, cutting out the pieces of the glass. It might come out rough, but when it comes out rough, you can then use the glass grinder to smoothen out any edges. After that, you would take the copper foil tape, just tape made of copper, and you would add that onto the glass, onto the edges folded both sides. And the copper would be used, it's for something that the solder can stick to. That's what the solder sticks to. But before that, you'd add flux. You'd add flux onto the copper foil. Flux is used to make the application of solder easier. And once you applied that, you'd use the control box to control the heat of the soldering iron. And then you just use the solder to connect all the pieces together. And then that butterfly became the first thing I created and the first step towards this project. They'd also given me a considerable amount of clear normal glass before I jumped right into stained glass. They didn't want me damaging any of their good stuff yet. And in that time, I made a few terrariums, and I clearly made a few mistakes, as you can see from some of those photos. The one with the crack there, that was because while I was soldering, I let it drip too much onto the glass itself, and the heat made the glass crack. That was a sad day. But I decided to search for any more clear glass I could get, because I wasn't looking to spend a lot of money. I mean, no one ever does, but I wasn't looking to spend a lot of money on massive bins of glass that most glass companies sold. So I was looking for the offcuts, which was the smaller things that would come off of the bigger things that they didn't want anymore, so I'd get it for cheap. And I visited two companies, Glassman Retreat and South City Glass. In Glassman Retreat, I met a very sweet woman behind the table after explaining what I wanted to do, and after she realized I wasn't trying to work with mosaics, as a lot of them thought I was, and was actually working with glass somewhat to their scale. She ran off in the back and then returned 10 minutes later with a box of offcuts for me. And so I asked, how much should I pay you? And then starts the dance of, no, don't pay, and then I say, no, but I have to. And then she says, no, but like you shouldn't though. And I was like, no, but I really should pay something. And then I do love someone who's aggressively kind, because then all she just says is, no, shut up, just take it. Okay. And I listened. Then I visited South City Glass, and I met a man who wasn't the owner that I was in touch with to get the glass with, but an older man. He gave me the glass, and because they thought I was working with mosaics, they cut it in tiny pieces. So that happened again. And I was speaking with him, and when he realized that I was working with bigger glass, he was very quick to start trying to show me how he does it. And he told me a few things. He told me that you don't necessarily have to cut glass from one end to the other. If you just cut it enough in the middle, hard enough, and then snap it hard enough, it'll about work. And he showed this to me by cutting in the middle. It was about the size of his hand, and he took it and he slammed it against his forehead. And I'll give it to him, it only took him one go. It snapped immediately. And the grin on his face, showed me that the method either didn't affect him at all, or it already affected him a long time ago. Either way, he seemed like a lovely man overall. So, after that, a friend of the family reached out to me, and they said that they had worked with stained glass for a while, and they were happy to give me the pieces. Once I got them, I noticed that they were smaller, but that's probably because she was getting them as offcuts, just like me. And I thought it would still work for jewelry and any smaller projects. I'll take anything I can get. That stuff's expensive. And by that point, I had a fair amount of stained glass, just smaller pieces. And the one issue I had when starting to work with everything was my soldering iron. Right. First, I had gotten it from a Chinese store, the type of place that sells everything. It was what was recommended to me by my mentor. And however, on the first day I used it, I couldn't help but notice that the tip had started smoking. And so I was like, okay. I called my grandpa, who used to run a hardware store, and had actually previously grinded the tip of the soldering iron to make it flat, because it's easier to work with. And I asked him, and he said, no, it's just smoking because it's new. I was like, okay. And then I started using it for just a bit longer, and at that point, I realized that I probably had to put it down once a fire started in the chamber of the soldering iron. And I realized that there was a small, tiny chance that that wasn't because it was new. So I had to throw that away, and I got a new one. And I was using a control box that was to control the temperature. And that means that you'd plug the soldering iron into the control box, you'd plug the control box into a plug. And that meant that when I got back and I tried to use it, the new one, I realized that it had the wrong plug. So I had to go and I had to change it, get a new plug. That was okay. And then I had to try and use it again. And I realized that the end of the soldering iron wasn't flat. And I had just thrown the one I had just had grinded away. So I needed to grind it flat again. And I couldn't get it grinded flat because my grandpa had left on holiday. So I had to use that one. But I thought, okay, I'll buy soldering iron tips. And I bought soldering iron tips. Perfect. I try to use them. My soldering iron's too big. Can't use them. So I get a new soldering iron. Then I get a smaller one. And then I realize that they're too big for my soldering iron. So I get another one. I decide that, okay, they're not fitting. I need to just work with what I got. And I use it. And it seems okay. I get used to it. But then the tip of the soldering iron starts getting dirty. I've never used a soldering iron before that. And it was almost like the solder was hardening onto it. I'd been using a damp sponge to wipe it off, as was instructed to me by my grandpa. And it just didn't seem to be working. I said it was unusable. So I had to get a new soldering iron. And I got a new soldering iron. This time, the tips that I had bought did fit on the soldering iron. They did, thankfully. However, it was the wrong plug again. So I had to get a new plug. Then, the tip of the soldering iron got dirty again. I couldn't fix it. but I decided to just step away from it for the sake of my own sanity. And that was the end of that. I worked with what I got. But anyway, as time went on, I had done enough practice, and I needed to move on to bigger stuff, meaning I needed more glass. Unfortunately, when it came to getting colored glass, it was a bit more difficult. The Art of Glass, where my mentors worked at, didn't sell panes of glass, they just worked with them. They got the colored glass from their suppliers. And while they assured that they could order me the necessities I needed, I had ordered all my tools and stuff from them, from their suppliers. The issue was that I couldn't get glass that way, because I would need to know the colors I want, specific colors, the make, the size, and the only way to do that is to go to their suppliers. The issue is that they close every day at 3, they're closed on the weekends, and they're an hour's drive away from my house. So that didn't happen, and I had to wait until it was holidays. So I bided my time working with the glass that I got, making other different things, doing my best at this point. And then eventually holidays came around and I visited their suppliers. And it was a place called Glass Graphics. Now, I only found out late in that it was a Muslim-owned company, and the reason that that's important is because I wanted to go on a Friday. And then I realized the night before that they're not closing at 3, they're closing at 11. So that was a bit of a scare. I was able to still get there, thankfully. But yeah, it worked out. I was able to get there. And after that, I went there and I met a man named Brandon. And I asked Brandon for me if I could look at his offcuts. They had an offcut bin, and it's full of offcuts, all of the stuff they use, and I asked if I could look at it, and he said, oh. And then that's when he told me that a woman had just come in the day before, and bought 4 kilograms worth of stained glass offcuts, every bit of stained glass offcuts that was in that bin. So I was there for no reason. However, he definitely did try. He did try and help me. He took me around the shop and he showed me more affordable glass. I was able to get some colors. I was able to get black, white, green, yellow, and blue. But I'm actually not able to get any warmer colors. Fun fact, that's because in the production of making glass, they use gold chloride in making warmer colors, which is why I wasn't able to get any reds and pinks, and that made it significantly more expensive. So those are the colors I got, but I was still very happy with what I was able to get. So after this, I really came to realize that what made my experience so fulfilling was more than just working with the stained glass, but quite literally the friends I made along the way. It was sweet to see how accommodating everyone was, and how each person I talked to in the field was not only understanding, but once realizing that I was really there to learn, wanted to teach me something that I probably didn't know prior, even if some of them might have given themselves brain damage in the process. I'm also incredibly proud of what I've been able to make. Some things are more difficult than most, and handling glass all the time can be rough on the hands. For example, the first time I handled the soldering iron, I grabbed it immediately by the metal part, not the handle of metal, and I will admit that was not the last time I did that. Not only that, but also a glass grinder. You take the glass and you hold it against the grinder, it grinds the glass. You know. For some reason, it gives you a lot of cuts. They're not massive, but they're just like, they're enough to be so annoying. So, it would just take one day, and on one hand I could count 18 cuts on the tips of my fingers. I'm not bleeding out, I'm not gonna die, but they're annoying. Still, it was worth it. And I've always found satisfaction and fulfillment in making things. It's why I did woodwork when I joined the school, and it's why I'm currently doing design. As tedious as making something from scratch can be, it's incredibly fulfilling to be able to hold something in your hand and know that you made it despite the difficulties. And I'm proud to have completed everything I set out to do and put it on my presentation table. And I'm proud to have finished this project and to have created something using a skill that I not only find beautiful, but incredibly useful. Now, on this table, I have what marked the beginning, the first thing I ever made, which is the butterfly. Bit shabby, but it's okay. And I have the last thing I ever made, which is the lamp. Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and everyone in between. My name is Seaton-Smith. My project was originally on architecture and interior design. It took me about 6 months to realize that this is far from what I enjoy. The planning that was needed before you can start designing your house drained me. It took a lot of convincing from friends and my parents before I gave up on architecture and interior design. So, instead, today, I'll be talking to you about my experience in the medical field of first aid. During these 9 months, I realized that I wanted to study medicine after school. In order to be sure that this was my field of interest, I decided to do some volunteering. I wanted to volunteer for a first responder company in order to get some experience in the field. Not long after deciding to explore the field, I met a CMR, Cape Medical Response employee who works in the control room. She told me that if I take a first aid course, level 3, and do some shadow shifts, I might be able to help out at sports events. After a long period of trying to find a place where I can do the course, I found a place called PEC, which stands for Professional Emergency Care. At PEC, I learned how to perform many things, such as your basic life support, your primary and secondary surveying, and how to treat certain medical emergencies and trauma injuries. Your basic life support is your cardiopulmonary resuscitation, also known as CPR. Doing CPR is not a simple thing. You have to push really hard down on the chest for the CPR to actually be effective. For an adult, you have to push 5 centimeters down on the chest. It is 30 compressions and then 2 breaths. And you do this 5 times before you swap with another person. While doing the CPR practice, our instructor told us that none of us should be out of breath or tired. Well, there was a lot of us trying to not breathe so deeply and hoping that the sweat on our foreheads was not showing. I found out that the CPR dole, or the Annie dole, was made so that medics who were in training did not have to practice on each other and possibly break ribs. I also found out that the face of the rescue Annie dole was that of a girl who had drowned in the Seine River in Paris. A mold of this girl's face was made because the guy who did an autopsy thought she had a very calm expression in death. Copies of this face were made and sold, and one of the guys that created the Rescue Annie doll saw a copy of the dead girl's face in one of his relatives' houses and decided that her face would be used for the Rescue Annie doll. She, later on, was known as the most kissed girl in the world, for obvious reasons. Primary survey is the assessment of your HHABC, which is hazards, make sure that you and the patient is not in a dangerous situation. Hello, your patient's level of consciousness. Help, get someone to call for an ambulance. Airway, is anything obstructing the airway? Breathing, how is their breathing? And the patient's circulation. The secondary survey is checking the patient's vital signs and any other injuries you might have not seen to start with. Being able to treat medical emergencies is knowing the signs and symptoms of those medical emergencies, whether it be a heart attack or a stroke, and to know how you can help. We are told to call for help, and in some cases that is really all you can do as a first aider. Trauma injuries are bleeding, wounds, fractures, dislocations, chest, head, and spinal injuries. We learned how to splint fractures, bandage different wounds, how to pack a wound, and how to do a log roll for spinal injuries. I would like to ask on stage Kareen, who will be my test dummy to show everyone how we were taught to bandage. So, most people will bandage an arm like this, just your normal round arm. A lot of the time it will fall off, become loose over time, or I mean if you do it too tight they could lose a little bit of circulation. So instead, our instructor told us that if we bandage the arm a little bit more at an angle, now do forgive me if I do not do this so well, there's a higher chance that it won't fall off, you won't lose circulation in the patient's arm, and it looks a little nicer. Thank you. I want to tell you a little bit about the different levels of paramedics. You have your ALS, ILS, and BLS paramedics. ALS stands for Advanced Life Support, and the ALS paramedic will be used to treat a patient of a higher priority. ILS stands for Intermediate Life Support, and this level is used to treat a patient with a fairly high priority. BLS stands for Basic Life Support, and this level is used to treat the lower priorities. You get 4 different core priorities. P4, blue, is when the patient is dead. P3, green, is walking wounded, and they don't always need hospitalization. P2, yellow, is where the patient needs intervention but can wait and doesn't need medical assistance straight away. Orange can be a P1 or a P2, and this priority is where the patient needs assistance almost immediately. P1 red means that they need to get to hospital this minute and the siren's gone. The first time I went on a call, I was with 2 paramedics in the ambulance. The call out wasn't really anything interesting, but I was just happy to leave base and actually go on a call. It was to transport a patient from a hospital to a step-down facility. Upon arriving at the hospital, the 2 other paramedics with me put their gloves on. So, I quickly grabbed my gloves out of my pocket to try to put them on. Well, I was very unsuccessful trying to get these gloves on. I spent 5 minutes trying to get these gloves on while there were so many nurses around me. I just had my gloves half on my hands, just dangling there while I tried to get these gloves on properly. At CMR, I did not have any, you could say, interesting or hectic calls. The worst I've seen was where a patient had fallen and hit his head on the ground. There was a little bit of blood, but nothing too bad. I've even had a call to a car crash, where it was a P1 call, so the sirens were on. And then arriving at the scene, you find out that it is a single car accident, and the patient had hit a nose and it was bleeding. But, because we were not the first to arrive on the scene, the patient had already been seen to and had a bandage covering the nose, and she was just walking to the ambulance. At the single car accident, firefighters and police arrived on scene. Although it is really good that they were there, and it can be really stressful for a patient when that many people are around and there are so many lights on. I went on another call to where a patient had had a seizure while he was driving. When we arrived on the scene, the patient was really confused and had woken not long before we arrived. And there were so many people and lights around this poor guy, which was confusing him even more. I would like to just play a little video for you guys. Hopefully this goes well.
Oh, open the compound. Thank you. So what's the first thing that you do? Thank you. So scene safety apart from us.
What's wrong with you?
Your hip or your ankle?
Okay, Okay, so first we assess the situation. Okay, what's the mechanism?
So she was busy washing her roof and slipped off because the child had wet.
Okay, first things first, we check for any head wounds, anything like that, nothing there. He's fine, okay, that's fine. Yeah, that's fine.
Do you want me to jump in?
Jump in, please, Bob.
Okay, so.
Also have to leave the couple on scene.
Alright, well, we're gonna expose. Okay, scissors. Well, we need to see from all joints, so you please keep dignity. So, first aider, would you get me a towel to cover the pelvis, please? So we're cutting, we're gonna be removing the shoe. Ma'am, please don't scream, we're gonna try and remove the shoe, okay? Can you feel this?
Yeah, okay.
Can I feel for pulse?
Okay.
Can you wiggle your toes for me? Slight movement.
Oh, I see there's some blood there. What's happening there?
Obvious signs of deformities, swelling to the area. Is this normal for you, ma'am? We normally do this.
No.
Do you have previous injuries
No.
that I need to be aware of?
No.
Well, let's compare to the other side,
Okay,
right? So when I do a secondary survey, ma'am, is there any pain when I push here?
No.
Pain?
No.
Pain?
No.
Pain?
Yeah.
On this side or this side?
Other side.
This side, okay. I have to feel to see if there's any more injuries, okay?
Okay.
So looking at the one limb that has got external rotation and elongation on the one side, so there's an imbalance comparing both limbs. Do you have allergies?
No.
First you want?
Mr. First Aider,
Did you consult?
what drugs are we going to do here?
Do you have your own Prada? Yeah.
Okay. They split.
It's split. What are the principles of splitting?
Is to
keep it steady.
Okay, so to immobilize the joint above and below the fracture.
So here, they were trying to.
Okay.
Oh,
First
no,
they
a
go.
little further, sorry,
Help
Karen.
here.
Here, they were trying to figure out what technique they wanted to use for splinting the leg. They started off doing this where they folded it,
So then it's
and then they decided to try the other way, where you have the splints the long way, but it can be quite uncomfortable for a patient.
why have we got so traction in this again?
Because it's contraindicated if you've got any injuries lower than the knee.
Just to show you guys that they're all people.
Cool. Are you okay with that, Aaron?
I know your thing with the toes there.
Right.
I have been fortunate enough to be with these people for 9 shadow shifts. I would like to say a big thank you to my internal mentor, Kim, who has supported me throughout my 2 different projects. Another big thank you to my external mentor, Max, from CMI, who unfortunately could not make it tonight because she's currently on a shift and could even be out on a call at this moment. A thank you to her fellow paramedics for putting up with me on my shadow shifts. They all taught me so much. And a special thank you to my parents, friends, and family members for all their support.
You see that beast over there? That's my Yamaha 350 Warrior, the quad bike I've been working on for the past few months for my project. Hi, my name is Ameer, and let me tell you why I decided to revive a legacy and how much of a pain it ended up being. The reason I chose this bike was because it belonged to my father. It had been sitting for a very long time, and due to the grade 12 projects, I finally got an excuse to fix it. And everything just worked out perfectly. After not knowing much about bikes or even engines alone, I decided to challenge myself and really put myself in the deep end for this project. I came up with the name Reviving a Legacy because in the past, before I was born, My family would always go quad biking every weekend. The stories I would get told about the bike my father loved. It was super fast, it had nice blue panels and easy to spot out. The main goal of this project was wanting to restore this bike to its former glory and finally be able to ride it again. History of the bike. In the past, I've only heard of one big accident, where my uncle drove the bike, flipped it, and crashed it, which really damaged the frame. Don't worry, he's sitting in the crowd. It was fully repaired, as my father had taken it to Yamaha to get fixed. But there was a problem with the carburetor. I would assume the reason the bike got stored away for so long was because my father was getting older. He did not have much time to take it out, and with my experience of fixing the bike, I now know that it was probably the carburetor. Ups and downs. I had many ups and downs with this project, oftentimes more downs than ups. But once I finally achieved my goal on fixing the bike, the smile on my father's face, seeing his bike work and starting for the first time in 15 years, made it all worth my struggles. My father said he wanted to show me how to change gears before I learned to drive it. But he left and took off and took it around the block and left me behind. So I guess I'll never know. Having a friend with me along my journey really made the struggles less stressful. I remember when we were both struggling with our vehicles, we would laugh it off and keep going. One of the highlights of my day was when break came along, we would crack a monster and laugh the struggles off. When either of us had problems with our vehicles, we would always help each other through it. Once we had free time, we would always check on one another. This project would have been a lot more stressful to handle if I did not have a friend to talk to. Thank you so much, Jacob, for dealing with my nonsense. My external mentors were a huge help with this project, as I really threw myself into the unknown. When problems came along, which I could not deal with or just did not know how, my externals were more than happy to give a helping hand. I cannot thank them enough for having the patience with me and dealing with more of my nonsense. What I've learned from this project, which I will remember for the rest of my life, is that I'm really proud that I can reassemble this bike just working off the frame, and that I now have much more knowledge about everything to do with bikes and engines. Oh, this is my nightmare. The carburetor was my biggest struggle and fear when I got to the point of taking the bike apart. I was super nervous because the parts were so fragile and little. It took me around 2 hours to clean thoroughly. I could feel the disappointment showing on my face once the bike did not start, which destroyed my confidence knowing that it was overflowing with fuel and I was unsure how to fix it. I felt like I would never be able to revive this legacy. So I took it off and asked my external on what to do. We both took it apart together to assess what was wrong with it. After tampering with this for another 2 hours, we found many things wrong, such as the float level, the pin, and even circuits running through the carburetor were blocked. We decided on replacing the carburetor, so I took it whilst it was leaking petrol all over me. I smelled rough. The shock on my face when I went to a shop and they said it would cost 12,000 rand for a replacement was insane. At that price, I could get a whole new working bike. Luckily, my father called me. He had a friend who was a biker, and he knows of a place to get it fixed. This place was really cool, as they specialized in bikes and quads. By fixing the overflowing, the shop managed to finish the next day, and I was charged 450 rand, which beat the 12,000 rand by a long shot. However, once I put the carburetor on the bike again, it still did not start. Now the carburetor was just getting no fuel. My external pointed out the choke was stuck. I pulled it out, saw there were tiny dents blocking from pushing the choke in. I took a screwdriver and sandpaper, and after sanding for a bit, the choke fit back in. Despite fixing the choke, the carburetor was still blocking fuel. So I decided after spending 4 days on it, I wanted to know what was actually wrong with it. I took the bike to the bike shop again, and they took it in. I explained the problem and they said no worries. Once I went over to see the bike again, it started and ran. The guy was kind enough to explain to me that the pin was the problem. It was very blunt. He was kind enough to teach me things that I did not know about the bike. He said, I did a really good job on putting it back together and getting it semi-running. He did not charge me as he knew I was doing a project, which I thought was very kind of him. Finally, with all the problems fixed, I put the bike together, it worked perfectly. I was very happy with what I had accomplished. Now learning to ride the bike. Learning to ride the bike since the start of this project has been my main goal, to get the bike to ride again and of course be able to ride it on my own. Once it came to actually driving the bike, it suddenly became much more scary than I anticipated. It's really simple though. It's the same concept as a car, except clutch is by left hand, back brake is by right foot, and gears are by left foot. Somewhat simple. Sounds scary, but actually really simple to figure out and get used to. Once I took my first ride, I figured everything out from there. Final reflection. Looking back on this project, I'm incredibly proud of what I've accomplished. What started as a broken bike sitting in the garage became a personal journey of growth, learning, and connection. I took on a challenge I knew little about, pushed through countless struggles, especially with the carburetor, and came out with not just a working bike, but a deeper bond with my father, a stronger friendship with Jacob, and a newfound respect for mechanics behind engines. Reviving this bike meant more than just fixing something old. It was about bringing a piece of family history back to life. This project taught me perseverance, problem solving, and the power of support. And it's something I'll carry with me for the rest of my life. I would like to give a thanks to my externals and internal mentors. They helped me a ton with this journey. And my mother and father, which I don't know where they are, they helped a ton, lifted me and Jacob every single day. And yeah, thank you.
Nostalgia is a sentimental longing for the past, and it often refers to a time, place, or feeling of comfort and joy. Flavor can be such a nostalgic experience. When it comes to food, it is deeply personal. One bite can transport you to that place, with those people, and the feelings you felt at that time. It's similar to perfume. If you wear a certain scent on a very memorable occasion, you will most likely remember that scent if you smell it months later, and it will immediately take you back to those moments. In the same way, food captures our memories through the most intricate flavors and delicate textures. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Emma Winter, and for my project, I designed and compiled a cookbook. When I was a little girl, one of my favorite things to do was visit my gran and spend hours playing kitchen and cook. She made me a play oven from a big cardboard box with painted hot plates and buttons that we glued on for knobs. I thought this was the best thing in the whole world. I'd drape big blankets over her kitchen table, turning it into a cozy little home. Inside, I'd cook up imaginary feasts for my toys and host endless tea parties. Those afternoons were filled with laughter, warmth, and the kind of pretend play that only feels real when you're small and safe with someone you love. I sort of feel that same warmth now when I'm in the kitchen, only now I get to cook real food on real stovetops. How the tables have turned. At the end of last year, I had no idea what I wanted to do with this project. I did know that I wanted to produce something that I could physically make. I have always enjoyed cooking and being in the kitchen. It's something that brings me great comfort and satisfaction. I've also always enjoyed the process of organizing and laying out content. For example, taking great care in the layout of books at school, which led me to the decision to design a cookbook. At the beginning of this process, I did not realize that designing a cookbook is not as simple as it sounds. I knew the basics, but quite soon into the process, multiple people made me aware that it takes about 6 or 7 people to produce a cookbook. There are the recipe developers, food stylists, food photographers, recipe writers, editors, designers, and then of course the production of the book, which includes the printers and then later on publishing. I then changed my perspective. I decided to treat this process as a learning opportunity rather than a big task, to find the skills that I enjoy and become aware of the skills that I found difficult and not very interesting. Yes, it would take me out of my comfort zone, but it would also give me a chance to discover what I am really passionate in within the process of designing a cookbook. So instead of setting the creation of a cookbook as my goal, I decided to focus on enjoying the process. This, however, was still not easy for me. I felt like a deer in the headlights of a car. Wait. In a way, I was paralyzed by my fear of failure. I had always watched the grade 12 projects when I was younger, so all I had in mind was the end result, and this terrified me. With lots of courage, the first step was to talk to people in the field that I wanted to explore. I met with a man named Richard Chamberlain, who has a catering business and has worked in hospitality. He kindly lent me a pile of his cookbooks to spark my inspiration and showed me around his kitchen. At this point in my project, my confidence was not great. I was way too scared to reach out to people, and I started rethinking my project. I didn't think I had a compelling reason for doing this project, and I didn't want to lose my passion for cooking. I wanted my project to be meaningful for my career in the future, and I doubted whether a cookbook would be the right choice for that. I considered a few other options, but after many conversations, I decided to stick with my initial idea. I realized that although I may not become a chef or even pursue anything in the culinary industry, I will learn many people skills, design skills, I will learn to use a camera, and most importantly, I will become more skilled in the kitchen. That's my inspiration. Finding a theme for my book was the next step. I first thought of basing my theme around Cape Town. I wanted to explore food in different cultures, like the Cape Flats, the Boer Kaap, and communities like Constantia, for example. I thought I could go into Cape Malay food or the typical braai food. I was also interested in a balanced diet with nutritional qualities, which would have meant going into clean nutritional food. There were many options, but although these interested me, I still wasn't quite sure. I wanted to include people in my project, and I have always been intrigued by the term nostalgia. I decided to find people who were willing to share their personal nostalgic recipes with me, along with an anecdote that connected them to the recipe. I then figured out that I wanted to find these recipes, remake them, tweak them if necessary, and then turn it all into a beautiful cookbook. I found a few different mentors to help me with the different aspects of this project, and then I embarked on finding the people and the recipes that I would use. The next step in the process was to find the recipes and sort through the ones that I had in mind. I had many conversations, and eventually I found a few people who were willing to share their personal recipes with me. I drew up sketches of each dish, made and tweaked the dishes, and then I retested them. I had to redo some recipes countless times, and I had many failures in the kitchen. My reflectors fell onto the butternut dish a few times, and I had a few times when my cheesecake burnt, and I got burnt many times, and the knife slipped a few too many times, but that's what you have to endure as a chef, right? I then moved forward onto photography. I first attempted to use my dad's old Canon camera, but then a family friend, Adam, kindly lent me his newer Canon camera. I could now play around with the styling, the plating, and the camera angles. This was my favorite part. I decided to go with natural lighting because I liked the feeling and the colors it brought out on the food. There were a few incidents during this project, one being the camera was unbalanced in the tripod and fell straight into the corner of the cheesecake. Luckily, the cheesecake was fine. No, I'm very sorry, Adam. Another issue I ran into was my procrastination to start the photography. I did all my planning during the hotter months of the year, when the sun was still semi-shining, and I left the photography a little too late in the winter. Luckily, I didn't start too late, and I managed to get some really successful shots. But with good lighting, and when the weather was really terrible, I could see that it affected the photo quality quite a bit. Once I had all my photographs, I then moved on to the editing process. I got in touch with a family friend who works in the design industry. He fortunately had an old computer with the software on it that I was going to use, and he kindly let me use it during this process. I have never been more frustrated in my life, but I slowly learned the shortcuts and the ways to use it. And after weeks of editing, I finally sent my book to the printers. Throughout this process, I had so much fear that I wasn't going to successfully produce something that I truly loved and I was proud of. But after 9 months of this process, I can firstly say I have managed to achieve great pride in my very own cookbook, and I have also got through it all, whether it was easy or not. I have learned so much about myself in terms of motivation, perspective, and confidence, which I will definitely carry into what life brings me next. I have learned so many skills in terms of food, photography, and editing software, and I've definitely been able to lay my perfectionist obsessions down slightly. Although things may not be perfect, without letting that perfectionist part of one's brain rest when it is necessary, you will struggle to move forward and reach out for what you really want and truly can achieve. Food can be a very nostalgic comfort, and this is what the book captures. Each recipe includes a nostalgic personal anecdote that gives the reader a bit more depth to what each dish means. I can now say, standing in front of you all, that I am proud to be here and share a nostalgic cookbook, Tastes of Home. Please come check out my stand, ask questions, taste olives, which are also for sale, and of course page through the book, which is obviously for sale. Lastly, there's the printing process. Lastly, I would like to say a huge thank you to my family and friends for believing in me, keeping me motivated, and putting a smile on my face when the last thing I wanted to do was think about this project. Thank you to my internal mentor, Kim, for your patience in guiding me through this process and keeping me on track whenever I went off course. As I said in the beginning of this speech, it takes many people to design a cookbook. So I would like to give a special thank you to Tessa, Sean, Teresa, Adam, and Marco for making this process a whole lot easier. Thank you to everyone who shared their recipes, tips, and stories with me. This book would never have been possible without you. And lastly, I thank anyone whom I may have forgotten. I truly could not have done this project without the support that I received. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Eyala Wainwright, and for my grade 12 project, I filmed and produced a surf documentary. Ever since I was a kid, running around with my little brother, my mom has always been behind the camera, capturing and soaking up every moment in both the US and South Africa. As I've grown, the love I have for my childhood being behind a camera has grown immensely. and with that has my love for cameras and film. When I was about 13 years old, I was gifted my mom's old film camera for Christmas, which my parents had caught my wandering eye glimpsing at. That day alone, I think I took about 13 pictures. And for those who don't know, film is quite expensive, so that's a lot of pictures to take in just one day. With this camera, my eyes began to grow more in love with being behind the lens. I grew a passion for capturing moments just like my mom. When it came to picking what to do for my project, I always knew it had to be something that included being behind the lens, especially because everyone told me, make sure that you choose something that you'll love and that will keep you focused. I knew I didn't want to do photography though, because I already do that, and I knew that it wouldn't push me. That's when I came up with the idea of a documentary. I've always loved the way documentaries are made, the emotion that they hold, and how raw they feel. A surf documentary felt like I had hit the nail on the head. My brother is in love with surfing. I mean, it is his true love. And with that, we watch a lot of surf films in our home. As I watched these films, and my brother and his friends, I couldn't help but notice how much passion they all seemed to have for surfing. I knew there was something special there, and I wanted to find out exactly what it was. Fast forward, I landed on making a documentary that I hoped would capture the unique surf culture of Muizenberg, but more importantly, the stoke that one feels when surfing. I was lucky enough to meet Alan van Heesen, a world-renowned water photographer and producer, at one of my brother's surf competitions. He became an external mentor and truly made this whole thing possible. He unfortunately cannot be here tonight, but I still want to give him a huge thank you. Before actually filming anything, there was a lot of preparation that goes into it, which for me was probably the worst part. I couldn't answer the questions I needed to, and felt a lot of pressure to figure everything out. In my heart, I knew that I could do it, but at the same time, I really wasn't so sure. After a few meetings with some lovely people, I finally landed on somewhat of a plan, deciding on interviewing 3 people from Muizenberg. From the very beginning, I always knew I wanted a diverse mix of people. Angelica Rosland, one of my friends, was always top of my list. She has a heartfelt story and is such a passionate surfer. Titch Paul, as some of you may know, is a local legend and owns the second oldest surf shop in Muizenberg. I knew he would add a much-needed rich history to my documentary. My third person was up in the air for quite some time, as I'd reached out to a surfer, but he never responded to me. That's when I reached out to Natasha van Geenen, who replied to me with such excitement and joy that I knew she was just perfect for the fit. By the end of January, I knew who I was interviewing and was excited to get started. I also spent a lot of time filming my brother and his friends while they were both in and out of the water. One of my favorite parts was capturing the joy on their faces after they saw the surf. As everyone will tell you, or may have already, our projects usually hit a lull, and mine was no different. My project slowed down due to the fact that we had a bunch of schoolwork, as well as our grade 12 plays, but it picked back up towards the end of March. I could finally do the interviews. Alan guided me through this process, which I was extremely nervous about, but with some extra questions from him during the interviews, they turned out just how I had pictured them. We shot all of the interviews on Alan's camera in Lifestyle Surf Shop in Muizenberg, as well as using all of his sound equipment, which made the biggest positive impact. Fast forward to May. I had all of my interview footage, but I still needed a few more beach scenes. This meant that I spent quite a few afternoons on both Komaki and Muizenberg Beach, capturing beach scenes, as well as surfers in the water. Before the editing process began, my whole family and I got invited to one of Alan's film premieres, called Le Jardin, which was very exciting and a great way for me to get a bit of extra inspiration before I began editing. Everyone told me that the editing process would be the most lengthy out of my whole project, so I went into it knowing this, but was still quite surprised by how long it really took. The many ups and downs that come with editing are very real. The accidental delete of a clip or the struggle of learning new software is definitely worth the final outcome. Thank you, Mom and Dad, for calming me down when I thought the world had ended, or helping me fix whatever needed fixing. I truly could not be more grateful. Editing was something that I found very difficult to actually begin doing and to find a good momentum. This then caused quite a bit of anxiety around my whole project, and I wasn't sure if I was actually going to finish, but deep down I knew I would because I wouldn't let myself not. Getting the beginning of my film done truly made everything start to flow. And during this time, I also found it very helpful to watch other short documentaries as a way to gain inspiration, as well as seeing what type of styles I liked and didn't like. At the end of the editing process comes doing the music and adding and doing the color grading, which is very fun and it truly makes the biggest difference. It took my film from unfinished to complete and made everything come to life. Although, choosing the music and still finding a way to make the story flow was definitely something I underestimated. Having a complete documentary felt incredible, but it definitely wasn't the end of my project. I still had to figure out what I wanted the cover to be, which thankfully came to me very naturally and could be seen right here. I chose this particular picture because I liked its simplicity and I felt like it represents my documentary in a beautiful way. During my many hours spent on the beach in the beginning of the process, I also captured a lot of stills, which I've grown very fond of and can be seen on both my website as well as on my stall over there. I want to shortly mention that a couple of weeks ago, I got to spend a week up in Jade watching the World Surf League take place, which was so inspirational. The amount of videographers and photographers on the beach was incredible, and I felt lucky to film the pros. That trip truly reinstated my passion for film and creative directing, which I am hoping to study next year. This whole project has made me step out of my comfort zone and reach out to people that I never would have in the first place. It has made doing something in film less of a dream and more of a reality. Now let's watch my documentary, The Corner Culture, which can be found on my YouTube, as well as my website, Eyala, as well as the QR codes on the back of my cards that I'm selling over there. Thank you, and let's watch The Corner Culture.
Well, Billabong once coined the phrase, "Only a surfer knows the feeling." That's exactly it. There's just something from the time you stand up on a board, the motion of it just somehow grabs you and you want to just experience that. I think Muizenberg has primarily remained unchanged. You know, when you're a young kid, because every wave's new to you, you think it's the best wave you've ever surfed. But I think it's the same wave you've ever surfed.
Muizenberg is probably, from what I've experienced, the most diverse of the places I've been to. Not just because, okay, there's equal men and women in the lineup, and not just equal people of color and that difference, but also the craft that everyone's surfing. So longboard, shortboard, paddleboard, sup, foil, you name them, that's what you see at Muizenberg. And I have not gone to one beach around the world where I've seen all of these different crafts in the water at the same time, experiencing the same lineup. I think that variation in all our surfers and our surf community is really what brings us all together.
Yeah, Muizenberg is in a bay, so it is protected, and so you have to get a wraparound swell. But generally, a wraparound swell anywhere in the world will clean up the lines. So in an offshore day, you've got beautiful, clean lines here, And it's nearly always like that in an offshore day. It also, we talk about period, and so period in a swell, which actually helps the swell. So although there's a shallow slope to Muizenberg, because it wraps around, it helps the period, which also cleans up the lines and turns it into something really nice. If we had some artificial reef here, we would be in serious business, because you've got the waves coming in clean lines. We just don't really have anything to turn it in, take it up another step.
I've been down and I'm wondering why these little black clouds keep walking around me, with me. In West Town and I'd rather be high, think of walk me outside and buy a rainbow smile, but they're free, they are free.
I am Angelica Rasland. I am 17, from Cape Town, just all over Cape Town I would say, but kind of based in Muizenberg. I learned when I was a kid, I don't know how old I was, but then stopped for like a good couple of years and got back into it in 2020. I surf with my dad and my older brother, which is a lot of fun. I get to steal their waves, which is very nice. That I think also is definitely a big part of why I surf, is because my dad has been doing it his whole life, and I saw my brother doing it, and then he got good, and I was like, okay, I want to give it a go, like it looks fun. So yeah, they've definitely played a big part in the reason I started surfing.
But everything we need, love, I can feel in my bones. Oh, on days like these and days like those, days in the sun, nights under streets, and I'm singing to my...
A big part of it has become the community and building some sort of relationship with the people around, and the establishments on the beach, lifestyle. Just surf and have fun and also feel some sort of safety, because I had people around me that I knew. I think that's what makes it special, is the people.
You'll see there's like the people that are the locals, and they all know each other, and everybody chats and gets to involved with each other. But there are people that come from all over the world to come here and learn to surf, and they kind of get like taken into the Muizenberg surf community and like welcomed and shown around and given that experience of Muizenberg. So I think that for me is really special, is how everyone can connect here, being whoever they are.
And now I'm happy to be in the water for an hour or 2 hours. Then I wanted to be in the water for 6 or 7 hours. So I probably got 100 times more waves then. When I was young, every day was a good day. I just wanted to be in the water.
Look at that! Watch it spin, watch it spin. Oh my god! Far out!
My favorite memory with my dad surfing at Muizenberg is actually the day that he told me to get off my shortboard, that I wasn't catching any waves on, and he put me on a York longboard. And I just remember catching the best waves. Like, he was still pushing me onto the waves at this point, and it was so magical. Surfing has changed my life in so many ways. My mother was sick when I started, like really, when I needed something to really look forward to. The surfing was there, and it was one of the only things that brought me that sense of comfort and safety, and I could just like relax and nothing was stressing me out. It's taught me a lot about even just applying things that I do in the water to life, and like the sense of like you'll fall down or you'll get knocked over by a wave like over and over, but you just gotta get past it and make it to the back line. Yeah.
Would have expected myself to go to university, get a normal job, go to work, but instead I found myself traveling the world, surfing different beach breaks, meeting so many different people from so many different countries, and just that path of like a journey of meeting people, new cultures, and really like broadening my horizons. I think that's where surfing has taken me.
It's been amazing that I've never really had to work for a boss. I've never really had to answer to anybody. And that's quite a nice thing to get through life and go like, you know, I'm my own boss. I've never really had to be accountable to anyone. Having said that, you have to be really accountable. You have to be really disciplined because you've got a family and you've got other things. So you're accountable to yourself. So it develops character, it develops personality. But it's been my whole life. Myself and another friend, John Morse, would catch the train because he went to Maris Brothers. And if the surf was good in winter, we'd get off the train over here and we knew we had 2 longboards available to us. And we'd go and surf all day. We'd surf from like 8 o'clock in the morning till about 2:33 and then catch the train home in the afternoons, having surfed all day. Then I'd get home and I'd ask my dad I'd say to him, Dad, I saw the surf was really good in Muizenberg. Can you give us a lift through? And then he'd give us a lift through and then so that's how passionate I was about surfing in those days. And to be honest, I'm never really at ease unless there's one side of the land that has water on.
It's really somewhere where I express myself. So my dad always says to me, he's like, I can see when you're angry when you surf, and I can see when you're happy when you surf. And that's why I love it, is because sometimes, you know, you have all these pent up emotions and you're like, oh, I can't, like, what do I say? And instead I just go and surf it out. And I think that's really what keeps bringing me back, is that relationship to my emotions.
Almost like you're chasing this feeling when you're on the wave, and I don't think I've ever experienced the feeling like that. That excitement, that joy, just that intense energy of the ocean and the board and the mixture of the two, and just, yeah, I can't give you an exact answer, but I'm hooked, and I continue to surf because I love it, and I love the ocean, and again, to experience it in that way is just something truly special. It's, yeah, building a connection with the ocean and learning how to understand it.
And now in the latter years of my surfing life, I'll come here and I'll surf a longboard, and because I've got bad ankles and I used to be able to walk a board, etc., now the motion still just thrills me. I'll just stand on a board and I'll follow a wave around and go like, this is absolutely beautiful. It's just like, this is how I started, and it's almost like dust to dust. It's just a beautiful feeling. It's just so freeing. You just feel like, yeah, it's just really, it's the feeling. It's just the, yeah.
How are you guys feeling about your surf?
Cold.
Frothing!
But yes.
Pretty frothing!
Thank you guys guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I just want to give my thank yous. I want to thank my family for constantly supporting me, Alan for teaching me the most, Jacqueline for helping me create my story when I truly felt very lost, Anya, my internal mentor, for making me feel a little less overwhelmed each week, as well as my brother Ezra and his friends for letting me use some slightly embarrassing videos that added great character to my documentary. And last, but certainly not least, everyone that was in my documentary. Without you, it truly would not have been possible. Thank you the very most.
Now, I'm sure you all in the audience know exactly why you're seated here today. But I thought I'd remind you one more time. Our grade 12 projects, which we have worked so hard on for the last 9 months. 9 months. Good evening, everyone. My name is Theodore Gordan-Davis, and for my grade 12 project, I was completely stumped. I just knew that I wanted to tell a story. Firstly, could anyone in the crowd please tell me what kind of animal this is? A cow. Okay, yes, but what else? What was that? Yes! This is an Nguni calf. That's incredible. Yeah, obviously. Obviously. That's true. Okay, I shouldn't have let that slide. But thank you. Thank you. These wonderful creatures are characterized by their spectacular coats, and specifically their black-tipped snouts. But why are they so special to me? I need to press the thing? Yes. Every December, my family and I go to Hamburg. Now, you're probably thinking, oh, Hamburg, like Hamburg, Germany. That's a common assumption. What I mean when I say Hamburg is this. Located between Port Alfred and East London lies a coastal village that easily provided me with enough inspiration to last a lifetime. With a population of roughly 1,348, according to the 2011 census, we are met with the breathtaking Hamburg of the Eastern Cape. Many people haven't heard of it, but those who have all but sing its praises. This vibrant and wild place is somewhere that I have been privileged enough to go to yearly throughout my life. The pure freedom and unbridled interaction with the natural world that I was exposed to from such a young age has completely influenced the young man I'm becoming. Hamburg has allowed me a space to grow, both within myself and with the people around me. Driving down the dusty dirt road, one is met with a rusted yet inviting sign reading, "Welcome to Hamburg." Only once you've passed it by will you realize just how welcoming the local people can be. Sitting in a traffic jam of cows and goats gives you the perfect opportunity to take in your surroundings. Gorgeous blue skies and lush, overgrown pathways made up of diverse weaves of plant life. Didn't press the button. Diverse weaves of plant life just twisting around each other. You're met with spectacular sunrises regardless of where you live in the area, and equally breathtaking views. There are houses right on the beach, and this sounds like a travel brochure. There are houses right on the beach, and one can practically feel the waves lapping at your feet as you take a long walk to the Kiskama River mouth. Hamburg is, however, accompanied by a curiously large number of wind turbines, which are here, yes, wind turbines, which one can see at night as little red lights in the distance, winking at you, saying goodnight. My family has been going there for generations, 5 generations, and have built up a great relationship with the many other families who live there. Now, I'm going to be quiet for a moment as I pretend to organize my notes. I think maybe 5 seconds will do. Yes, okay. Right, now that that slide has been up for a few seconds longer than the others, I'd like to take your attention to this blurry rectangular shape in the bottom left-hand corner. And that is why we're really here. The Nguni cattle. I'm on the wrong page. Still on the wrong, there we go. More specifically, photographs of them, which really touched my heart and what they mean to me. This last December trip, my dad kindly let me use his Nikon D80. And I would like to thank him for pointing outside the window while we drove down the unpaved road, saying, Theodore, wake up, asking me if I wanted to photograph those cows. That moment was the catalyst for this entire project concept, a photographic perspective on the Eastern Cape's Nguni cattle. Across the landscape, there are fields of hundreds of purple and yellow flowers. You can see bees and butterflies fluttering and flying in the sky, and the residents are friendly and more than willing to take time out of their day to lend a helping hand. All you have to do is ask. Scattered around the houses, there are groups of goats and chickens, sometimes the odd pig or two scampering across the road. Now, I say road because that's rarely what they are. Often the only indicator of a road would be the evidence of tire tracks, having driven down that path a few times before. The plant life grown in between, the only indicator of where not to drive. To me, Hamburg feels like something you can rely on. It hardly changes. The roads and houses stay the same, but the people grow older, and the children grow up. For example, Nuzeti Makubalo, who is a wonderful woman that is famously known for the bread loaves she bakes, often at least 2 of which will be brought back home on departure from Hamburg. When I was growing up, she was a legend, and I was privileged enough not only to meet her, but to interview her for this project. She was so warm and kind towards me throughout the interview and gladly answered the questions I had for her, even going on with me on tangents to answer any that I came up with on the fly. Being able to have held my first ever interview with someone so kind and nurturing in nature was a blessing, as I was not very confident at public speaking, and interviewing someone was a completely different genre to take part in. The main focus of the conversation itself was, of course, the Nguni cattle, and Nuzeti's interpersonal relationship with them. Within the first few minutes, I struck gold. Quote, "You know, cattle. It's a part of our life, it's a part of our culture, it's a part of our custom. And pride. It's a pride," Nuzeti told me. And the glow in her face said more than those words ever could. Pride. The cultural significance that Nguni cattle hold is like the cattle themselves, larger than life. Upon asking Nuzeti about their involvement in cultural traditions, I learned how important a role cattle play in funerals, healing, and marriage. Last year, Nuzeti's husband sadly passed away. Herself and her family slaughtered 2 cattle. In doing so, one accompanied them to the grave, and the other welcomes him again, and he must come home. Nuzeti, 2025. I resonate with the concept of giving the deceased soul something to take with them into the afterlife, and furthermore, welcoming them back home. Now, research was one aspect of my project, but the physical aspect was something completely different. I had to take some pictures. Now is a great time to mention that I got my late grandfather's Canon, am I anything? Okay, no, we're good. Canon EOS 1000D for my 18th birthday. I just had to learn how to use it. Oh, that's not the right slide. Okay. I just had to learn how to use it. Now, of course, this wasn't exactly easy. I spent maybe 70 hours in the field over 25 trips and was often in some precarious situation. Oh, I'm on the wrong slide completely. This thing's very sensitive. I'm gonna put it down. Yes. Okay. And was often in some very precarious situations. Keep in mind, a full-grown Nguni bull can weigh up to 600 kilograms. And with horns, and armed with such impressive horns, it's no wonder I kept my distance. I took pictures of everything. Even though the cows were my focus, I felt I should share some of the other animal life that I was inspired by. Like this gorgeous border collie. Isn't he sweet? Back to the cows, though. My external mentor, Pippa Hetherington, an internationally acclaimed artist and photographer, who's exhibited worldwide and happens to be a family friend of mine, coincidentally was coming down from England to none other than Hamburg for work. I jumped at the opportunity and got onto a plane with my dad, my camera, and a spare set of clothes. I had the chance to work with my mentor in person, in the field. Of course, I was absolutely brimming with excitement, and with that I set my goals quite high. I shared my ideal shot list with Pippa the night before our shoot, and she later admitted that she didn't have the heart to tell me how ambitious they were, how the chances of achieving them were so small. But lo and behold, I achieved my absolute dream shot. To me, Nguni cattle aren't just animals. They're individuals worthy of respect, with souls and a deeply rooted history. These are the photographs that woke me up again. Not just the photographs of the Nguni cattle, but a connection, an energy that's bigger than the physical form. One of the first pieces of work on Nguni cattle that I got my hands on, I technically got from Pippa. She contacted Dr. Carol Hofmeyer, who had a copy of The Abundant Herds by Marguerite Poland at her place of residence in Hamburg. At the time, I wasn't aware that the woman I had merely heard of as Carol was the same Carol who started the Kieskama art project. It was incredible, and she kindly let me keep her copy of The Abundant Herds. After a look through my newest acquisition, with time taken to admire the many intricate illustrations, I really started to acknowledge and understand how beautiful the Nguni cattle coats are, and that they really are unique, completely and utterly exclusive to each cow in its essence, like a fingerprint. I fell in love with them. In fact, I actually based one of my entire final artworks, coats, on these patterns, with the intention of highlighting their individuality. To do this, I had to zoom in. Well, I couldn't take the entire picture in detail and then just crop it. I had to go within meters of each cow, which is dangerous. I had a couple close calls. And then physically zoom in and focus it manually, which, yeah. Anywho. I took so much care to get as detailed of a photograph as I could at the time, so I could try and do them justice. And I'm hoping I did, at least a little bit. Cattle. Oh, hold on, one more thing. I decided to print on fabric because I was inspired by Pippa Hetherington and had to learn interacting with the customer company setting. It was very difficult. There were lots and lots of correspondences. I was put on hold for maybe 10 minutes. At least they added lobby music at one point, so that was quite interesting. But it was a long process to get these printed. It was worth it, I'll admit, but it was a long process. I definitely learned some skills. Cattle. They are the reason I started this whole project. They are the reason I've gotten to where I am now. I love them so deeply, it's difficult to put into words. As I've said previously, I resonate with them on an energetic level, and sort of translate that within my images. And I trust I really have managed to do that with a select few. I was unsure in my ability, but I've gone and produced this project, which is a win for me. To me, the mammalian creatures I've taken stills of are worthy of awe and respect. They are large, spectacular, and precious individuals. I have always existed around art, but passively, not aware of its presence, or taking time to consider it as something that does in fact surround me. It was always just there. And now that I'm on my own artistic journey, I can acknowledge how people share their experiences through it, and even have their own artistic visions. I see it as a strong form of self-expression. I like to think that somehow what I've produced could be considered art too. Last but not least, I'm so grateful to the people around me for their unwavering support. To my dad for his dedication to my field shoots and Hamburg trips. To my tutor Juliet for the hours spent standing in my corner and teaching me on just how one is supposed to approach an essay in the first place. To Mr. Stodel for his unending belief in me. To Pippa Hetherington for her sage advice and brilliant presence. And to my family and friends for their interest and excitement for what I have produced. I am so thankful for everyone in my life and really want to acknowledge the blessings that they are to me. Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Jacob Williams. Over the past 9 months, I've been working on a project called Stock to Stunning. It started as an idea based on my interest in mechanics. I chose it because I wanted to challenge myself and learn something new. Today, I'll take you through the journey from the idea stage all the way to the final result. The car is right there. I don't think I need to explain why it visually appealed to me. The car is a 1989 Honda Integra D16A LS. It's a far less common version of the Integra D16A RS, as it has 2 extra doors and a larger boot. Trust me, finding parts wasn't easy. I've always had an interest in cars, but never quite to the extent of some of my friends, who were into racing games, car photography, and the world of mechanics. So even to my own surprise, I decided to take on a full car restoration. Well, I've always been good with my hands, and I've had a natural understanding of how mechanical things work. I'd never taken on something as complex and large-scale as rebuilding an entire car. Originally, I planned to do a boat. That idea came from the memories of amazing camping trips with my brother and friends, trips filled with hours of fishing. I thought building a luxury fishing boat would be a great way to relive those moments, and maybe even improve them. At first, it seemed like a fun and cost-effective project. I imagined myself out on the ocean, chasing big fish with friends. It sounded perfect. But after 2 weeks of researching boats for sale, I checked the prices of parts. Reality hit. Costs were much higher than I expected. A week later, my brother, Ben, and I visited a boat repair shop, Yamaha the Boating Shed, to ask for advice. The people there weren't very friendly, and I didn't feel comfortable asking the questions I had. But it didn't matter. The second I stepped into that place, I realized something wasn't right. The idea of restoring a boat just didn't sit well with me anymore. As we left and walked to the shop to grab energy drinks, I turned to Ben and said, "I don't want to do a boat." I felt lost, but I knew I still wanted to do something mechanical. That's when I remembered something my friend Andy had said. "Why are you rebuilding a boat? What good is that? Do a car or something useful that you can actually use." That stuck with me. He was right. A boat would be purely for leisure, while a car would be both a fun project and a usable daily driver. I also thought back to the times I went with my friends to the Killarney racetrack for car shows and drag races. Those were some of the best experiences I'd ever had. That's when I made the final decision. I was going to rebuild a car. Around the beginning of February 2025, I started searching every car sales platform I could find. I spent at least 3 hours a day scrolling through listings, sometimes even entire days. My original plan was to find a Bucky and upgrade it with modern features. I wasn't even thinking about classic sports cars or JDM models at that point. But one day, after forcing myself to take a break from searching, I came back to find a listing that caught my eye, a Honda Integra D16A. The ad was only 2 days old, posted right during my one-day break. It was listed at 50,000 Rand, exactly in my budget. I showed it to my family and they all agreed it looked amazing. I started researching the car and quickly realized it ticked every box. It was reliable, affordable, easy to work on, had a strong visual appeal, and came from a brand with a solid reputation. I reached out to the seller, got his WhatsApp number, and set up a time to view the car. That was the moment it all became real. I wasn't just dreaming anymore. I was beginning a project that meant something to me, and I knew I could learn from. The deal we made, the car was mine. After a very fun drive home, we parked it under our carport and it didn't move for almost a month, which almost made me go insane. I was so excited and eager to work on it. I'm extremely grateful for Ameer, my best friend and classmate, as his family let me use their workshop to work on my car. When I got to the workshop, the first thing I did after the introductions was go straight into attempting to fix the leaking power steering. This was a challenge. At first, it seemed pretty straightforward. Loosen a bolt here, loosen a bolt there. It was basically just a game of Twister, but inside an extremely greasy engine bay. It took about a full week to remove and replace the power steering. The procedure came with many life lessons. The main one being, if it's not working, hit it as hard as you can with a hammer or pull on it till you bust your knuckles open when it does come loose. I managed to get it out and brought it away to get refurbished. The next day, I got back and tried to replace it. Oh Lord, I guess I hadn't learned all the life lessons yet. So the power steering would not go back in the same way it came out. This meant I had to take out the entire front suspension in order to mount the power steering to it and lift that back onto the underside of the car. Then I started doing smaller jobs, like repairing exhaust manifolds and an aircon pulley. This was also the time I made the to-do list, as issues started up way too quickly. The last thing I did was bring the crusty seats away to be reupholstered with some lovely leather. I personally think it made the biggest difference to the car. After a long term of school, I was very, very eager to get back to work. At this point, I was fully comfortable in the workshop. I joined in with all the mechanics' flow jokes and wasn't shy to ask for help. But I didn't really need the help as much as I did before, because I was a lot more confident and managed to get around struggles by myself. This holiday's main job was repainting the car. I knew from the beginning this would be a big job, but wow, did it pay off. When I got to the workshop, the car's paint had already been sanded off, so I started by helping Michaela mask off the car and spray it with 2K primer. Then I got to sanding the primer. It was a very tedious task, just sanding for 3 days straight, but my motivation was way, way, way too high to care. I'm telling you, I've never been in a good mood for that many days straight. After a dry sand and a wet sand of the entire car, I moved on to even more sanding. It was the hood, boot, bumpers, dry and wet sand again. Over the weekend, Michaela sprayed the car with the original color Polar White Z. My jaw dropped when I walked into the spray booth. This is about the time I started putting the car back together. This was complicated, however, as I wasn't the one who took it apart. The first day wasn't too bad. I actually managed to do a lot. The next day, however, I got sick, like really sick. I still came to work though, however. Thank you to Ameer's grandmother, Shan, for still lifting the biohazard I was. Working in that state was definitely a challenge. To help you picture it, just imagine a blind zombie attempting to install door seals backwards. I'll get to the door seals now. I pretty much had to skip work the next day as my sickness got worse. Best believe I didn't do any project writing that day. Time is now next week, Monday. That's this week. this week Monday. I got to work and was very happy to see my car look somewhat like a car again and not just rust, rubber and paint, dust on the floor. I installed a few last bits and spent the rest of the day helping Ameer finish his quad bike. Well done, Ameer. Tuesday, only 4 days ago. This was my last day at the workshop. I was very much motivated to work that day. I started with going to an auto glass shop to go buy a windscreen as the OEM one was cracked very badly. After spending some time there, I went back to the workshop. I went straight to work putting on the last door seal. Putting on the door seals wasn't an easy job because I was putting them all on backwards, basically the left seal on the right door. Neil, one of the mechanics, came over and showed me the mistake I was making, and I started putting the seals on correctly, and wow, it was so much easier. I ended off fixing the broken air vent, which I had failed to repair in the last holidays. My problem was that I didn't know how to dismantle the dash, but I used this diagram from my manufacturer's manual to help me. The last day at the workshop was very successful, and I ended off very well. I couldn't have done this without the help of the people who encouraged me when I was stuck in moments where small bits of progress felt like a huge win. Working alongside Ameer was, and still is, the only reason I got through this project without ever feeling like giving up. Having someone to crack a monster with and choke the bad situations away was a huge help. I couldn't have done this without you, Ameer. This project started as just an idea. I didn't know if I could do it, to be honest, and there were moments where I thought I couldn't. But now, looking back, I managed to do it in just 21 days. I also realized I didn't just build a project, I built confidence, patience, and a belief in myself. That's what I'll carry with me long after this project is over. Thank you to Ameer, Abdul, Sadiqa, Shan, and all the amazing mechanics who helped me when I was at my lowest. And a huge thank you to my mom, dad, girlfriend, brother. I couldn't have done this without you. Shot.
This one's going.
That's flipping good. No, you know what I feel for.
End of the road, ek sê vir julle. Masucha en die loewe. Hello and good evening, everyone. My name is James, and for my project, I decided to learn an instrument, more specifically, the piano. So this all came about last year through our proposals. Originally, I wanted to start a clothing brand, and I had it all figured out, with logos, with names, knew where I was going to get my stuff. Unfortunately, cost is a big thing, you know, so yeah, it was just too complicated and I just decided to leave it. And for a while, I was a bit lost because at the time, that was my only option. And I was just pondering for a while. And then when I was at home a few weeks after, and I was just chilling, watching a series, my brother came up to me and he said, "Yay, do you know what you want to do for your project?" And I said, "Yeah, Mike Lich." And so my mom gave me a recommendation and she said, "Why don't you learn an instrument?" And then that got me thinking, back to when I was 5 years old, when I would listen to Good Hope FM with my dad, or Usher CDs with my mom, or even Drake with my brother in the early 2010s. And the main thing was I always wanted to play an instrument, but I never really had the courage to ask or to start. But I loved hearing the guitar, I loved hearing the piano, as well as the xylophone and the stylophone and all of that stuff. So, when my project was set in stone, I had to find a few mentors. And initially, I had an external mentor in mind. He's here right now. His name is Jeremy. And we go to the same church together. And every time he would play the gospel music on the organ or on the piano, I would just be in awe. Because his playing ability, the emotion and the passion that he puts into it, I was stunned. So I knew if I wanted to do this, I had to learn from this guy some way or another. So one Sunday, I went up to him, I built up the courage, and I asked him if he would be willing to teach me how to play the piano. And he said no. But then he told me that he would be more than willing to teach me how to read sheet music. But in my head, I'm thinking, wouldn't it make more sense to learn the instrument first before I read music for it? But I decided it's whatever, it's fine, it's still a skill. But luckily for me, a few days after, he had a change of heart. And that made me very happy. So after that, I needed to find an internal mentor. And originally, I wanted Mr. X, because he was a part-time opera singer, which I didn't know. That surprised me. And I thought he could help me along my journey. And when I asked him, he said no. He said it would be too stressful and he didn't know how to cope with this journey, so he said, sorry, not sorry. So then I had to think, who else in the school had great music expertise? Now, originally I had heard of Mr. Islop, our eurythmy piano player, but I thought he would be in and out of school and he wouldn't be here constantly. So I had to really think. And then Luzon came to mind, the high school music teacher. Now I can't lie, we met under some unusual circumstances. Let's just say I was a bit naughty that day. But one thing I realized about this woman is that she's so caring and she's really willing to teach you. And a few days afterwards, when I asked her to be my internal mentor, without hesitation, she said, absolutely. You know, instruments are such a beautiful thing. You can learn so much, and I'll be more than happy to show you. And then I knew, it's the one. So, after all was said and done, with my mentors being confirmed and my project being confirmed, I needed to start. So then I asked Jeremy if he would be willing to start with me in the December holidays. And yet again, he said no. Because he'd been working all the time and he had other stuff going on in behind the scenes, so I didn't want to argue with that. But he said he would send me some music documents. So I would just play these documents, but not in the holidays, because I needed my rest also. So I started in the beginning of this year, actually about 2 days before school started. And I needed to find a piano. So then I asked within my neighborhood and my community if they knew where I could get one. Luckily for me, there was a community hall that had a piano. And they would only use it on Sundays for church services, but apart from that, it would be untouched. So I asked my neighbor, who's in the crowd, if she could give me the keys here and there, and I explained the whole process of my project. And she was more than willing. She said, yeah, no problem. And then I get into this room, I see that white sheet over that piano, and I was ready. So one of the things I wanted to achieve throughout this process was just to enjoy it as much as possible, because I didn't want to bore myself to death every time I have to play. And also, it was to see what I could learn and how far I could actually take this. So then, after playing the documents for a while, I finally had my first session with Jeremy. And I was excited to show him what I had done and the progress that I had made. And as soon as he sat down next to me in the piano, he said, "Okay, play middle C." And I was like, huh? So I started just doing random notes and like random stuff, and he knew what I was doing, but I was just praying he wasn't. Eventually he asked me, "Do you know where middle C is?" And I said no. And I was expecting like an aggressive and an annoyed response, but to my surprise he said, "Okay, let's just start from the beginning." And that put me at ease. And after the first lesson, he gave me a piano book just to learn from. It had some basic exercises that I could learn, and it had some songs that I could play. Oh, I forgot about this as well. But some of the songs that inspired me along the way were Runaway, Kanye West, Tyler the Creator, Thought You Wanted to Dance, beautiful song, and Congratulations by Mac Miller, also beautiful. Yeah, and I would play this for quite a while, and I knew that eventually I would have to perform in front of an audience, and I thought it would be easy to just get a song from this book. So he told me that he would be hosting a concert where he gets all his students together and he sees the progress that they've made. And then we were just in between which piece or which song I was going to choose. So originally in my head I thought, okay, it would be a song from this book. So I presented it to him, I was excited, and he told me it's too easy. And I was like, bruh. But luckily for me, 2 weeks before the concert, he gave me a piano piece to play. And it was called Bourrée in D minor. Now, even though I had a short amount of time and I had plays and everything going on, I still wanted to see how far I could get. So on the day of the concert, I just tried to stay calm and collected, just be happy, you know, just do what you need to do. But when I got to the venue, when we were going to play, I was surprised at the age groups of the students, because I assumed all of them would be in high school, and then I'm seeing someone who's 27 singing and a 16-year-old also playing. I was like, wow, I'm really not alone in this. But really, I learned a lot from every single one of them, and they really are amazing people. And this piece went very well, and I'll show you that now. Thank you very much. So, literally a week later, we immediately started on my second piano piece. And because the previous one was a grade 1 piece and this was a grade 2 piece, I really thought nothing of it. But when I went to him, he told me, listen, it's going to be difficult. So just keep practicing, keep working hard, you can do this. And originally I just brushed it off. I said, yeah, it's whatever. But then he told me, no, it's difficult, just practice it. And I was like, okay. So then within the Easter holidays, I would practice this as well as the beginning of the second term. And I was waiting for the next opportunity to perform again. So the next time I saw him in term 2, I asked him if he had any more concerts coming up. And unfortunately for me, he told me that he wouldn't be having one but only at the end of the year. So I was like, okay. So I asked Luzanne, my internal mentor, if she had any recommendations or if there were any concerts that were gonna come up. So she said, yeah, there'll be a music concert that'll come up. And I didn't know the date for the concert originally, and that put me off a little bit, but I was fine with it. But because in the mix of all this we had the Eurythmy performance as well, I was just praying that it was before or after the performance evening. Unfortunately for me, it was literally the day before the Eurythmy performance. And I'm not gonna lie, I felt like so stressed and I was anxious, my nerves were not calm at all, and I was really fearing the worst. On this particular day, I'd spent like all of my time cooped up in a drama room, practicing Eurythmy, and I just wanted to go home. But I knew I still had to play. So eventually, as I went to Centennial Hall, where the concert was happening, the nerves just didn't leave. It just stuck with me, and I didn't know why, but it just happened. And then when I played, I made a few mistakes, I forgot notes, and the rhythm was just all off. After that performance, I really was distraught, because all of the progress that I had made, I thought relied on that one specific moment. And that was one of the things that I didn't want to happen, and it stuck with me afterwards. The next time I saw Jeremy in the term 2 holidays, we practiced my final piece. And while we were practicing, I missed a note or two, and then I was just lost. I froze, and I didn't know where to pick myself up. So then he asked me, "Are you okay? What's wrong? You seem a bit off." And initially I denied it, but then he kept asking me, and I caved in. And I told him my last performance was terrible, and I didn't know what to think. I thought I let myself down, and I thought that all my progress and my playing ability was gone. And he told me, "Look here, you started playing piano in the beginning of Jan of this year, and already you got to a grade 2 piece. Most beginners don't even get past grade 1, so you need to be proud of yourself, and you need to understand that these things happen. Failure is a part of the process, but I tried my best to just brush it off. But after those words of encouragement, I was back in my happy place, and I wanted to play again, because that motivated me. For my final piece, I will be playing Mia and Seb's theme. Now this song comes from the movie La La Land, and it's very complex, very emotional. And even if you don't play an instrument, you'll see and you'll feel it. Before I play and say my thank yous, I just want to leave you with a quote, and it's from Beethoven himself. And it goes like this: "To play a wrong note is insignificant, but to play without passion is inexcusable." To summarize what that means is, it doesn't matter what you're trying, and it doesn't matter what you're doing. If you're enjoying the process, if you're enjoying what you're doing, you have the motivation to do it, you have the passion to do it, that's all that matters. Because if you have to force yourself to do something that you don't want to, there's no point in doing it at all. So thank you for listening, and I'll be going on to my thank yous. So the first person who I want to thank is my dad. Thank you for all of the lifts, even though you were very busy some days. and we were late a couple of times, but that's besides the point. But even if you couldn't, Mike was there to step up. But as much as this process goes, to my two mentors, I just want to let you know you are a major part of this as well, and I thank you very much. To my mom, my biggest supporter, always, from day one, even though you never saw what I was doing, you always believed in me, and I'm glad to have you with me because you always bring me up when I fall down, and I don't want you to ever forget that I love you to the moon and back. I'm not done yet. And finally, to my mentors. Firstly, Luzanne, wherever she is, I don't know. Oh, okay, there she is. You are really something special. When I first came to you, I didn't expect that kind of personality or that kind of emotion or whatever towards me. But you really encouraged me, and you really were the brick that built this building, or whatever the analogy is, I don't know. You really are an amazing teacher, and you really, I know that your music students are in good hands. And I'll say this because I'm not scared. The high school is lucky to have you, don't forget that. Lastly, my external mentor, Jeremy. You just know the right things to do, man. Even though some days I would show up stressed, I would show up not knowing what I would do whatever. You never fail to make me laugh, and you never fail to make me happy. And I think that's one of your best traits. You just build people up, and you love to see them grow and progress. And you do such a great job at it. And I'm always in awe of your playing ability, and I just want to say you are a maestro of the piano. Thank you very much. So, without further ado, let's close this thing. Thank you all for coming. Please come back tomorrow to see the rest of my amazing classmates. That's the projects for Friday. I'm out.